What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing well. I'm really excited about today's show because we're going to be talking about two things that we can do in order to change our genes. We had a show recently talking about nutrigenomics and the role that our genes play in our nutrition, our exercise, and our lifestyle in order to achieve the best version of ourselves. And in that conversation with Caroline, there were several things brought up that I think are worth talking about. But one of the big ones is the idea that your genes are your genes. From the start of conception to now, they're unchanging, and you're a slave to what they say you should or shouldn't do. And today we're going to open up the can of worms, the idea of epigenetics. A fancy word saying that the way you live and the things you do can actually change your genes or influence the way that they're expressed in your body. Get excited. Before we dive into that, just a couple of things. First, if you've been following our Transformation Tuesday stories, you'll notice that we haven't published one of those shows in a while. Because we do all of those interviews via video on both Facebook and Zoom, I've decided to move those Transformation Tuesday stories to our YouTube channel. That's right, if you didn't know, Defining Dad Bod is on YouTube. Because we recently met our goal of 50 patrons for the show, we've started putting out some exclusive video content that you can only find on our YouTube channel. So if you're normally a podcast listener, I encourage you to go check out our YouTube channel, Defining Dad Bod. The easiest way to find it is to go to youtube.com, type in Defining Dad Bod into the search bar, and you'll be able to find our profile there and click on our channel. In addition to the Fall Transformation Tuesday stories, you can find a recently uploaded video of Gabriel and I trying cricket protein for the first time. We had a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you'll enjoy that. So go check out that channel, subscribe if you're a YouTube fan, and every Thursday, you'll find one of the shows from last year uploaded from Defining Dad Bod, so you can revisit the practicality and the wisdom of the show, and maybe find it a little easier to share than a podcast as well. Thank you to the amazing patrons who are making this movement possible. And lastly, it's not too late to get 30% off of your genetic testing through HIPAA-compliant AGI. We had a great show on the topic recently with Miss Caroline, and the link is in the description below, along with some instructions since that 30% discount shows up after you type in the special code. As many of you know, Kristen and I recently got our genetic profiles tested, and it was very powerful and eye-opening on a number of levels. Somehow, knowing the genes you do or don't have that influence the exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that you need to be making is like having a user manual for your body. And I find that things like knowing I'm genetically lactose intolerant makes it a little bit easier to make intelligent decisions about where I get my protein without having to deal with the digestive discomfort. Similarly, knowing that I don't carry the athletic type 2 muscle fiber gene that's commonly found in Olympic athletes makes me double down my efforts for training when it comes to getting ready for the American Ninja Warrior. Whether it's demotivating bad behaviors or motivating good ones, I've found having my genetic profile is very powerful and hope you'll consider exploring it for you and yours. Again, the link's in the description. Make sure you follow the instructions so that you type in the right code and get your 30% off. Now let's talk about epigenetics. Have you ever heard the old adage, play the game well with the hand you're dealt? My grandpa taught me to play poker when I was 7 years old. I remember I'd sit down and play 5-card draw with him, and he would let the grandkids take turns on who called wild cards. Our favorite was Dr. Pepper. 3, 6s, and 9s. And I remember loving that version of poker because when 3, 6s, and 9s are wild, it's very easy to get something like a royal flush or a 4 of a kind. Because when 12 out of 52 cards are wild, then you have a huge opportunity to get some of those rare hands that it seems like you're only dealt 1 out of every 100 times. Now, a serious poker player is cringing right now. The idea of having 3, 6s, and 9s wild kind of takes the skill of the poker face out of the game. However, for a 7-year-old who's not nearly as good at poker as Grandpa, that was the way to play. Even when I was a kid, I had a really hard time with the idea of playing the game with the hand I was dealt. You don't have control over the way the cards land in your hand, and you have very little control over what ends up in your hand after you make your first discard. And then, you're stuck with the hand you're dealt. And I don't know about you when you were 7, but me and my cousins were terrible liars, and Grandpa kicked our butts regularly. Why am I telling you this? Well, life's a lot like poker. You literally have zero control over the hand that you're dealt at conception. When the sperm and the egg come together, your DNA destiny is set in stone at that point in time. And everything that's happened in your cells up until this point has been largely mitigated by that DNA. And just like poker, you've been playing this game of life with the hand you've been dealt. And for many people, that's a very discouraging thought. If your family tree is anything like mine, I've got cancer, cardiovascular disease, thyroid dysfunction, Ehlers-Danlos, Lou Gehrig's disease, and even psychiatric disorders going all the way up my family tree. It's almost depressing that I'm stuck with the DNA that I have. So, do I curl up in the corner and cry about it? Well, if life was just like poker, I have a few cousins who would have done that if they had a bad hand dealt to them in front of Grandpa. But what if I told you that studies are surfacing right now that suggest our DNA is a lot more like 5-card draw Dr. Pepper, where our genes are more wild cards than we might imagine? What do I mean by that? I mean, just like a child with a king, a queen, a 3, 6, and 9 in their hand, your genetic makeup is malleable. And depending on how you live your life, how you exercise, how you eat, what times you go to bed and wake up, your genes respond to what you do or don't do. In other words, you do have to play with the hand you're dealt. But there are a few wild cards in there. And if you play those cards right, you're going to be much better off than you started. Come on, Alex, are you really telling me that I can change my genes? Well, kinda. Science is very rarely ever that straightforward. The idea is called epigenetics. Let me explain. Every single cell in your body has a nucleus. The nucleus is the organelle of the cell that houses the genetic makeup of you. And every single nucleus in your whole body has the same copy of DNA. When a cell reproduces, like new neurons formed in your brain because of BDNF, which we've been talking about in our Exercise in the Brain series, or when a cell dies, like the skin cells you slough off when you wash yourself in the shower, those cells leave behind other cells that have the same DNA in the same kind of nucleus as it was passed on to it. Those cells of yours still leave behind the same copy of DNA that was given to them by cells before them. So the DNA that you had when you were growing in your mom's belly is the same DNA that are in your cells right now while you're listening to the sound of my voice. And that DNA informs everything from what color your hair and eyes are to how quickly you process glucose, whether or not your pancreas produces insulin, or even how many fast-twitch muscle fibers you have in comparison with your slow-twitch muscle fibers. But it turns out that as constant as DNA is, through the evolutionary chain, or even just your lifespan, there are certain parts of the hand you're dealt that you can change by what you decide to do with yourself. Furthermore, and I think even more fascinating, is the idea that some of those changes can be passed on in your children. Or to go back to my poker analogy, you have some wild cards in the hand you're dealt. And if you play those cards well, you can pass on a much better hand to your child. I hear parents say it all the time, I want better for my kids than I had. And for many, that might mean buying more toys, going on more vacations, or investing in parts of the relationship you felt you lacked with your parents. But as this body of research is growing, what I'm telling you is that part of creating a better life for your children than you had begins with the genes that you influence before they're even born, and then continues thereafter with the habits that you teach them that influence their wild cards. So today, I want to talk about one specific instance where epigenetics is a fact. And then I want to talk about why this idea concerns not only us parents, but also anybody who might become a parent as well. So first, the study. This study was published in the Journal of Scientific Reports in January of this year, 2018. The study was performed on human subjects through 8 weeks of hypertrophy training. Hypertrophy training, if you'll remember from our show previously about the acute variables of exercise, is 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps with about 70% of your 1 rep max weight. These are movements like deadlifts, squats, bench press, pull-ups, shoulder press, relatively heavy and intense with about 60 to 90 seconds of rest in between. Hypertrophy literally means hyper, which is over, trophy, meaning growth. It's the overgrowth or the increase of cross-sectional area of muscle tissue, which allows for enhanced metabolism and greater feats of strength and power. Hypertrophy training is basically about building muscle. You do lat pull-downs to grow your lats. You do bicep curls to grow your biceps. You do squats to grow your quads and glutes and hamstrings. And if you ask the average gym goer, That's what they're doing. 3 sets of 10 repetitions usually. What's powerful about this study is that when you biopsy the muscles of individuals going through hypertrophy training, resting from hypertrophy training, and up to 22 weeks after hypertrophy training, the effects of the muscle growth through the actual training itself lives on in the genes that are expressed in the muscle. What am I saying? The subjects were put through hypertrophy training, and then the genes in their muscle tissue were measured via muscle biopsy. They found that hypertrophy training activated a cascade of different genes through a process called supermethylation. Think of it like making every wild card in the hand you're dealt in a game of poker an ace, the best card to steal Grandpa's poker chips with. And not only did these subjects' muscles grow and all of their wild cards become aces, but 20 weeks later, even after the muscle tissue went back to its normal size, which is what happens after a bout of hypertrophy training, the genes were still active. The wild cards were still aces. And in the subjects who completed the hypertrophy training, when they did just one more hypertrophy workout 20 weeks later, they saw super accelerated results compared to those individuals who weren't a part of the hypertrophy training group. That just blows my mind. It blows me away. And if it doesn't blow you away, it's because I didn't do a great job explaining it. Let me say it a little differently. When you lift weights in a way that grows your muscle tissue, even after the muscle tissue goes back down to your normal size, you stop lifting weights altogether, your genes remember. And so when you pick the weights back up again, you get faster results the second time than the first time because your genes remember what kind of shape they were in before. This study flies in the face of several widely accepted ideas about exercise. First, in the obesity epidemic, many people think about exercise as a way to burn calories. In fact, leading experts weighing in on the obesity problem will often say we're fat because we eat too much and exercise too little, that it's all about energy balance, and we need to be at a calorie deficit in order not to inherit things like diabetes, thyroid dysfunction, and cardiovascular disease. And so many people think about exercise as a way to burn calories. Alex, did I burn enough calories during my cardio workout? Alex, won't I burn more calories at Orange Theory than I will if I lift weights for an hour? And though I understand the heart of these questions, studies like this say that the calories that you burn in your workout likely pale in comparison to things like genetic changes that you are creating in your own body when you work out in certain ways. If you work out in a way to burn the most calories this hour, but you're not working out in a way that will affect your genes for the next 20 weeks, then I say you're missing out. It's likely that if you work out just to burn calories, then 20 weeks from now, you'll probably still be working out just to burn calories, and you won't have changed. It's my hope that if you're committed to a consistent workout program, that it's the kind of program that makes the most out of the wild cards in the hand you're dealt. I'm excited for more studies like this to come out and explain to us exactly what kind of exercise is changing our genes and how to get the most out of that. The second thing a study like this addresses is the idea of muscle memory. I remember as a trainer, I hated the idea of muscle memory because in layman's terms, muscle memory really just referred to the idea that once you learn to ride a bike, it's much easier to hop back on the bike and do it again because your muscles remember the movement. As a trainer, that meant to me that people had carte blanche to do whatever they felt like doing in the gym, as long as they felt like they've been doing it long enough and well practiced enough. I've seen one too many people do a terrible squat that would hurt their back, simply because they thought they had the muscle memory they did when they used to play football 20 years ago. But a study like this suggests that our muscles remember much more than how they've moved in the past. In fact, it seems that muscles remember a time when we were fitter than we are right now, and they'll respond faster if we'll take that torch up again. And personally, it helps explain in the last 13 years of working with people why those clients who played tennis or football back in high school but haven't picked it up in the last 10 years get much better results much faster than clients without an athletic history. Though my personal experience is anecdotal at best, the energy balance equation never really explained to me why some clients did so much better than others. And in reading studies like this one, it feels like epigenetics was a missing link in my experience. My last thought on a study like this that I hope will stick out to you is that researchers found that even one bout of hypertrophy training turned on all of these genes and kept them on for up to 20 weeks. And for me, this says that every workout matters. Even if you can only get one workout in the next 4 months, then a great workout can turn on the genes that matter. And even though this study is particularly related to just hypertrophy, it's not far-fetched to think that there are other genes affected by one workout. And so if you're that person who's waiting till next Monday to start your new workout program because you just won't be able to stick with it until then, or you're just waiting until the new year, or you're just waiting until your next birthday, or whatever it is that you're waiting for, stop waiting. Even one workout matters now and can matter for the next several months. And it's not about the calories you're going to burn. And perhaps it's not even about looking good in the mirror right now. It's about turning all of your wild cards into aces. So every day, every new cell made, every game you play makes the best out of the hand that you're dealt. Don't wait until tomorrow to turn the powerful genes on today that you could right now, especially since they'll stay on for a while. Okay, Alex, you've convinced me. Got it. But I thought you said we were going to talk about how this passes on to my kids. Yep, I did say that. First, if you have kids already, or are influencing children in your circle, then you need to know that the habits that influence our genes are much easier to change for children than changing their actual genes. I'm certainly not suggesting that your child needs to go start hypertrophy training right now. However, it makes the idea of passing on a legacy of health and fitness to our kids a little more physical, a little more biological than simply the idea that we want to pass on a great life to them. For instance, imagine every time you go on an afternoon walk with your family, you are turning on genes in your child that will make them better at processing the sugar they eat, sleeping well, producing more brain-buzzing neurotransmitters. And imagine that those changes will last for weeks. Wouldn't you want to make a habit out of something that's going to influence them positively for the long haul? What I'm saying is that over the next several years, it's likely going to be the case that we'll see several studies that come out about the epigenetic effect of nutrition, exercise habits, and even our lifestyles that will likely validate the power of common sense adages. What if eating your veggies at dinner turns on certain genes? What if having time to play outside every day turns on other genes? What if wrestling with dad turns on even more genes? Those studies are coming down the pipes. It's just a matter of time. I hope you'll not wait for the scientific validation and you'll start doing what you know matters right now. I read an article recently that suggests that a father's exercise habits affects their child's blood glucose regulation for the rest of their life. The study wasn't talking about dad exercising even after the baby's born. The study is talking about dad exercising before and at the time of conception. Children of fathers who report exercising regularly at the time their child is conceived also show better insulin and blood sugar regulation, which leads to less risk for type 2 diabetes or even battles with body composition later in life. And interestingly, this study's finding was robust even in children of obese fathers, meaning that it didn't matter whether or not dad was successful in losing the weight. It only seemed to matter that dad was exercising at the time that he was also making babies. So whether you're currently a mom or dad, a future mom or dad, or just someone who might influence kids sometimes, I want you to know that the exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle habits that we decide to live by influence us biologically at a very deep level. And those influences might last 20 weeks, or they might even get passed on to our kids. So next time somebody tells you to play the game with the hand you're dealt, remember a game of Dr. Pepper with my grandpa. You can't control every card you're dealt, but you have a handful of 3s, 6s, and 9s, and you get to decide how you're going to use them. This has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.